Chapter 14. Nothing was normal anymore. I did not smile for the rest of the day, even though I spent the whole day with Henry and our mom. I was depressed, but long ran out of tears to cry by the time the sun rose. Losing two people who were close to me in this same week was beyond anything I could describe. When the sun was setting, I walked around with my family, but it did not make anything better. The weather was nice as always, and the sun was shining bright, but it only masked the horror going on in the town. Windwasher was a dark place. Earlier in the day, my mom had to be the one to tell Mrs. Banty about Suzanne's death. This reasonably made Suzanne's mom have a mental breakdown and sent her into a depression. What made it worse was the confusion about where Suzanne and I were yesterday. When Elizabeth had called Suzanne's mom to ask about me and Suzanne's location, she had claimed to see us walk into her house yesterday. Not only that, but she remembers having a conversation with us about what happened at the library. This made her feel like she was going crazy. My mom decided to try to comfort Suzanne's parents after our walk, and she took Henry to Elizabeth's house so that he could comfort her. I was alone for a little while, but it did not bother me at the time. I was too distraught from losing Suzanne. Richard ended up coming to the house. For some reason, he had a suitcase with him. "Hey, Thomas," Richard said when I opened the door. "Can you bring Henry here too?" He sounded like he was rushing his words nervously. "He's talking to Elizabeth right now," I replied. "He will be back shortly." "I can't wait. I gotta go." "Just tell him I said bye." "Why? What's wrong? Where are you going?" "I'm leaving. There's just too much going on. Clearly someone has a grudge against the people of this town, or something. I don't know, but I don't want to be a part of it." "Wait, you just tried to catch the criminal 2 nights ago. You had a good idea, and you have been helping in other ways. Why are you scared all of a sudden?" "Because Hector is accusing me of being the killer. Last night he questioned me, and I think he's planning on arresting me or something. I'm not gonna stick around to get in trouble for something I didn't do." Richard started walking away quickly. I walked out the door to catch up with him, to continue the conversation. "If you leave now, Hector might think you're more suspicious." Richard stopped walking, then looked back. "It doesn't matter. He already thinks he has plenty of proof. He just thinks you're acting strange, and he doesn't understand that's how you normally are. Well, I think he's strange for a detective. He doesn't like help from cops. He does weird types of investigations, and he shows up at weird times. Are you suggesting he could be the killer?" "I wasn't really thinking about it, but he might be. Everything he blamed me for doing, he is also guilty of, but worse. He wasn't accounted for during any of the murders as far as we know of, but I was almost always with you or someone else in the town." Richard paused as if he was waiting for me to respond, but I did not know what to say. Richard continued walking away. I stood still watching him until he walked out of sight. I walked back inside and sat down, letting all the thoughts in my head bounce around. I didn't believe Richard was the killer, but what if he actually was? Could he have went through something terrible to make his whole morality change? What if Hector was the killer? Could he really have been deceiving everyone this whole time? What if it was both of them? I was in such deep thought about the possibilities that I didn't realize Henry and my mom had returned. "Thomas," Henry said as he shook me lightly. I snapped back into reality. "When did you get back?" I asked. "5 minutes ago." "Oh, sorry. There's just so much going on." "I'm aware of that." He rested his hand on my shoulder. "Richard left." "What do you mean he left?" "I mean, he packed his bags and left the town. What? Why? He said Hector accused him of being the killer, and I guess he thinks Hector was about to bring him to jail or something. That's crazy. I cannot believe Hector would actually try to blame any of this on Richard. There's not even any evidence to suggest it's him. Apparently, Hector thinks otherwise. There was soon a knock at the door. I went to answer it to find Hector standing there. May I come in? He asked. I thought about saying no because of Richard suggesting he might be the killer, but I did not want to jump to conclusions like Hector was doing to Richard. I closed the door once Hector entered, but I stayed near the door. I'm sorry about what happened to Suzanne, he said. It must really hurt to lose someone right in front of you. I started to cry, and Henry did too, when he saw me get upset. It does, I stated. I just don't understand how it happened. I paused to try to control my tears, but it didn't help. She just got pulled into the bush, and she was gone. No trace of her. The killer never handled any of his previous victims like that. I want to know why it was different for her. There was a moment of silence. Maybe there could be a chance that she was kidnapped instead of killed, Hector suggested. If there's no dead body lying around, and the killer acted different than he usually does. I nodded as I rubbed tears from my eyes. Also, there may be some kind of secret hole under the bush. Someone could have dug one up to hide a body in if they ever needed to. I've seen it happen before. We could go check it out. Hector looked at me, and I nodded again. I took another moment to try to control my tears. Is that what you came here for? I asked. Not entirely, Hector responded. After investigating the suspects, I have come to the conclusion that Richard has to be one of them. The other two are likely Casey and Tyrone. Apparently, they are friends with Richard and have a history of criminal activity. Casey and Tyrone were both names on the list of people who read The Tale of Mr. Sketchy, but they were people I did not know. Maybe it's just those two, Henry said. Casey and Tyrone? Not Richard. He doesn't have a criminal record. Hanging out with the wrong crowd can change people, Hector replied, especially at your ages. Plus, I've heard statements about Richard from some people that suggest he has never been as innocent as you thought. Jaqual brought up some very interesting information about Richard when I talked to him alone. You may not like to hear this, but I'm going to file cases for them and try to get them charged for all the murders. You can't be serious, I stated. Why would you even believe someone like Jaqual? It's not just about what Jaqual said. And yes, I am serious. Nobody else has any evidence that could convict them. Sauter was the next I was suspicious of, but so much wouldn't make sense. While Hector was speaking, I started thinking about the article Jeruth I read in the library and realized I never brought it up to Hector. I decided to do it now. There was a news article a few months ago about someone claiming to be stalked for 4 days, I stated. Then, after the 4 days, that person was found dead. I think if that person was truly being stalked and killed by said stalker, that stalker might be the one attacking the people in Windwasher now. The Mr. Sketchy story may have been based off of this article. Hector looked at me and started laughing. Are you serious, Thomas? Hector asked in disbelief. You would rather believe that a killer from an old news article would suddenly come attack your town than troubled teens becoming obsessed with their favorite horror story? Just because there were some coincidental similarities? That victim in the story was delusional. There most likely wasn't anyone stalking him. I didn't find anything to prove that person's claim. You didn't? I asked. So you worked on that case? Yes, I did, Hector answered. And I didn't see any evidence of a person stalking him. or murdering him. Even if you somehow believed there was a killer and he wanted to come out of retirement or whatever, why would he randomly choose this town, almost in the middle of nowhere? He'd have a hard time hiding here for so long, and since it would be impossible for him to accomplish all his tasks without two other people, they all would need to hide in this town for the past few weeks. The only way he would be able to do that is if someone here was in on it and hiding him, which means I'd still take Richard in because he seems to be the only one who would do that. I did not know what to say. Richard has to be one of the people involved, Hector stated. That's the only way any of this would work, and it makes sense for him to help his two friends who are likely to do such bad activities. I'm about to take the three of them to court. Richard left, I responded. What do you mean he left? He just came by and told me he was leaving town. And you just let him leave? Even if I could have stopped him, why would I? You just let a killer leave. Hector shook his head. You'll see, Thomas. Once there's no murders these next few days, you'll realize it's him. I'm going to get the other two. Hector turned to walk out, but I decided to talk to him about one more thing. We can still set up traps, I stated, in each house that the killer might target. That way, if you're wrong about your convictions, we can still stop the killers before someone else dies. Hector turned to me and smirked. I can almost guarantee I'm not wrong, he responded. But what kind of traps are you going to set to stop the criminal? I'll let you know once I make them. I gotta think of traps that will definitely work. And go ahead, set your traps. If you do, let me know. Hector stopped as he was about to walk out the door. It'll be a waste of time. Hector closed the door. Do you think Hector might be the killer? I asked Henry. He seemed shocked to hear my question. Why would you think that? He asked back. Richard brought the idea up to me before he left. Basically, we don't know where Hector has been during any of the murders, and he seems to be doing unorthodox detective work. We don't know how detectives are supposed to operate. I guess you're right about that, but he should at least want to work with cops. What kind of people want to avoid cops? Criminals? Exactly. I can see that being suspicious, but why would he have killed Charlie, or let whoever he's letting help with the murders kill Charlie? Well, we don't really know how close he was to Charlie. They might have only been working together as detectives, not close friends. Plus, he didn't seem to be too fazed to hear about his death. That's true. Henry and I decided to drop the topic about Hector and focus on the ideas I had for setting traps. What kind of traps are you thinking of using? Henry asked. I was thinking of having a thin wire along the floor that the criminal won't see, I responded. When he steps on it, a net will fall on him. The net will have some bells that make a lot of noise to alert the people in the house. Do you really think that would work? It should work. If the killer doesn't know about it, there's no reason why they would. What do we do after that? I'm going to let the owners of each house know to run away when they hear the noise. Anything else? I thought back to the moments when I almost encountered the killer. Once with Charlie, another with Suzanne. I could have been falsely remembering, but I started to realize that there was a very faint brown fog when the killer was close by. In both instances, I started to think that the gas might be the reason why they were having trouble controlling their bodies. A gas mask, I said. Gas mask? Henry asked in confusion. Yeah, the criminal has to be using some kind of nerve gas. That's the only reason Suzanne wouldn't have had control over her body. I'm not sure how it would have influenced her to walk towards the bush, though. That's not important if we can avoid it, right? Exactly. We can figure that out later. Right now, we should get everything we need in case the killer attacks again tonight. Do you think we have most of the stuff we need in our basement? Of course. Then let's not waste any more time. Henry smiled at me, and I smiled back. Being in the basement with Henry while we were working on something that can help the people of Windwasher and bring justice to those that have died made me feel good. The sadness was still inside of me, but it was the driving force to make the traps as great as possible. When my mom came back home, I told her what we were working on. It seemed like she was worried, but proud of us at the same time, since we worked on multiple traps. We ended up needing to get more supply the next day to make sure every possible house had a trap set for it, but we ended up finishing that night. We had to wait yet another day before we set any of the traps. Thankfully, it did not seem like there was another attack while we waited. Early in the morning, I asked the mayor to help Henry and I with the traps. He gave us permission to place them in the houses if the families wanted them, but he did not want to help set them up. I was not sure why he did not want to, but I did not question him. Our mom took me and Henry to each house, and all the families agreed to have the traps in their houses. Once they were all placed, we could only wait more to see what happened.